Welcome into the Book It podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you found yourself listening to this, you're in the right place. If you're an event or equipment rental business owner, that's exactly what I do. If you're not, well, strap in because you're going to learn a whole lot about business in general. Because it's so much of what we talk about here on the Book It podcast can be applied to almost any business out there. Today, I have an incredibly fun topic here for us. We're going to be talking about a book that I've read that's incredible. It was written in 2011 by a gentleman named Eric Ries, and it's called The Lean Startup. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't have a startup business, and I have no idea what lean is, and I'm pretty sure it has to do with something manufacturing related. Well, you're right and you're wrong. We can learn a ton from lean and how we apply that to our business, and we can learn a lot about what it means to run our business when we understand what it's like to start a business using lean as a framework. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to give you seven full lessons from the lean startup. And I'm going to try to go quickly today because I always like to keep these under 15 to 20 minutes if possible. So strap in. We're going to start with number one, the build, measure, learn loop. Now, what the heck is that? Very simply said, the build, measure, learn loop is all about stop perfecting ideas in isolation and start testing them cheaply first. It's exactly like what it sounds. You want to build something and you want to build really the bare minimum viable product or service. You don't want to go out and build everything and spend all this time, all this money, all this capital getting something together only to launch that or present it to your customer base and then learn that there was never really a market for it. And then you want to measure what are people actually responding to. If you've launched, let's say, 3 things kind of in conjunction with each other, you're going to want to measure from a data standpoint, what are people actually engaging with? From a rental perspective, what are they putting on order? What are they inquiring about? If you've launched these 3 new things and one gets 10 inquiries, one gets 4 inquiries, and one gets 0, well, we're probably going to want to invest in the one that got 10. We might want to test out a few things with the one that got 4, and maybe we scrap the thing that got 0. So from a data standpoint, we really want to make sure that we're interpreting that data and we're learning exactly what it is that people want from us. Number 2, validated learning. Now, this is one of my favorite things in the book. And ultimately, validated learning is about measuring what the market does, not what you think it'll do. And that's a very important differentiation. So instead of, like we said before, you go out, you spend all this time, this money, this energy launching something only to see it collapse or fail and no one's interested and it just really missed the mark. That's where when you're trying to figure out what a good minimum viable product is for your business, you're actually going out and you're running tests. You're asking questions. You're getting people on the phone and you're saying, what is it that you need? How can I help you? What problems are you having? Tell me more about your business. Tell me more about your pain points. When someone calls into you, you're asking maybe some other questions. Instead of just, what is it that you need to rent from me? It's, well, what are you not renting from me that you're renting from someone else? And you're trying to figure out strategic things within your business, ways that you can grow, you can offer more to your customer base through validated learning. Now, in rental, validated learning means building a habit of connecting every investment or initiative to a measurable outcome. And then you're checking to see whether that outcome actually happened. So it's really a lot like the scientific method that we learned about in school. Instead of just saying, well, I think that this is going to work, so therefore we're going to do it, you're forming a hypothesis. And then you're developing ways in which you can test that hypothesis. And when you've tested a hypothesis that turns out to be true, well, then absolutely go ahead and roll that out. If you go out and you test it and it's an abject failure, that test saved your company a lot of time and a lot of money. All right, let's move on to number 3. These are vanity metrics versus actionable metrics. And I see this in almost every business that I've worked in. We talk a lot about KPIs or key performance indicators. Now, the objective behind a key performance indicator is this. We want to take a smaller subset of information that tells us the snapshot of how the business is doing. So if I can look at a few specific numbers and I can tell you what the business looks like today and then where we're on track to go, that information can be very important for a business owner. Now, oftentimes we might say, well, revenue is a great key performance indicator. What could go wrong in that? Well, what if I said that the business has $100 million in revenue? Well, you might think, wow, that's pretty good. But if they have $200 million in costs to run that business, well, then your interpretation of that is now going to be very skewed. So what's another way that we can look at that that's at least a step deeper than revenue? Maybe it's profit. Well, even then, profit can hide quite a few things as well. We can distill profit down into a lot of different subsets of profit. What are your profit numbers in certain rental categories? Does this line of equipment have a greater profit margin than this one? So ultimately, what we really want to do is we want to not just look at numbers that look flashy. If someone comes up to you on the street and they say, well, how much does your business do in revenue? And you say, well, we're doing $10 million in revenue. That sounds very cool. It sounds like you're very successful. But if I'm asking a business about its health and viability, the revenue is only one piece of the puzzle. I need to know what actionable metrics are going to give me insight into the viability of this business. If your profit margins are incredibly small, it doesn't matter how big your revenue is. A lot of the time, when you find out what these metrics are, they're less of a flattering number that you're less willing to tell someone on the street because it just doesn't sound cool. But to someone that's in business, they're going to be awed. They're going to be shocked. They're going to understand that that's a true differentiator within your business if that number, if that KPI is genuinely good. So we want to step away from the vanity numbers. We want to find the actionable numbers that are going to help us forecast how a business is doing. All right, topic number 4. Pivot or persevere. Now, this is probably exactly what it sounds like. You want to know when to adjust direction and when to hold course. Now, of course, they're talking about this in the context of a startup, but this absolutely remains true for every different business. I've seen business owners double down on decisions that they already knew were bad, but they've made so much investment in it already that they're just, I don't care. I have to double down on this. I have to. I feel compelled. And realistically, that is a logical fallacy. They believe that a prior investment therefore justifies a new investment in that, when realistically, history is filled with businesses that made ginormous leaps of faith. They put a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of things on the line. It was a ginormous risk that didn't work, but they pivoted at the right moment and they were absolutely saved. If you have a moment, look up the company that developed Swiss Army knives. They made an awesome pivot in their company around 2000. Instead of just pushing through and saying, this is what we do and we're going to hold to it, they said, well, yes, we can do this, but this thing is also not doing what it used to do. We need to pivot into some other directions. That strategic pivot saved their company. They're doing way better than they ever were before. And it's because of philosophies like this. Instead of doubling down, sometimes we just need to pivot. Knowing when to do that is incredibly important. Let's move on to lesson number 5. These are the 3 growth engines in your business. So the first one is going to be the sticky engine. This is what retains customers longer than it loses them. And this builds compounding loyalty over time. The viral engine generates referrals. So where each customer brings in more customers through word of mouth and, these built-in network effects. The paid engine converts revenue per customer into new customer acquisition, where the margin on each job funds the cost of finding the next one. So these 3 growth engines are really, when you distill everything down, the ways in which you can build your business. So to summarize, we have retaining your current customers, getting those customers to refer new customers, and then the paid methods that you get new customers in. Now, all of that compounds over time and when you set it up in an appropriate manner. So you get a very good paid engine going in your business. That gets you the customer. You take that customer, you retain them over time because you're operating in such a fantastic way. Then you're taking those fiercely loyal customers and you're getting them to refer more new fiercely loyal customers. So if you can get those 3 things right in your business, you're far ahead of your competition. Focus your time and energy on those 3 things. All right. Number 6, the 5 whys. So most people have heard of the 5 whys and they don't know much about lean. So the 5 whys are effectively getting to our root cause. Whenever anything happens, we want to know why more than we want to blame. Now, this is huge. I can't tell you how many businesses that I've been in where they're more focused on holding people accountable than they are actually fixing a mistake so that way it doesn't happen next time. By and large, what I see much of the time is that it is a lack of a good system that creates an unintended result or an undesirable result rather than a person who is intending that poor outcome. So the other way of looking at this is if we have a system where we can input a poor worker and allow them to go through that system and have a poor outcome, then that system wasn't good enough to begin with. So we want to be able to, through an exercise like the 5 whys, identify root causes, which are often a system or a process that is either not robust enough or doesn't have enough checks and balances or neglected something that it shouldn't have. And then we want to fix that. So I'll give you an example from an event rental standpoint. A tent was installed incorrectly. A client calls the morning of the event and says, we have to get someone out here to fix this. So what is our first why? Well, the crew installed it differently than the venue diagram showed. Okay, well, why? Well, they did that because the crew lead did not have the diagram on site during the installation. Okay, why? Well, the diagram was only shared digitally and the crew's lead's phone battery was dead. Okay, well, why? Well, there is no standard process for confirming that installation documents are accessible before a crew departs the warehouse. Why? And what might the root cause be? Well, the business may lack a pre-departure confirmation checklist that includes document access verification. The fix is the system, not a performance conversation with one crew lead. The reality is, if your entire event setup is dependent upon someone having a charged phone, well, maybe that's not the best system to have. And maybe we need to have a check and balance in place to ensure that no matter what happens on that job site, we are still able and capable of delivering the high value and service that we want to be able to provide. So that's the benefit of the 5 whys. Again, less on the blaming and more on the causation so that way we can fix the problem. Do you want to be right or do you want to make money? That's a very, very big difference in business. All right, we're going to go to number 7. Number 7 is small batches. Now in manufacturing, this makes a lot of sense, but what exactly can we learn from this with an event or equipment rental business? With this can relate quite a bit with our build, measure, loop, or validated learning sections from before. And what I mean by this is that when we release things in small batches, it is almost always faster than large batch production. So a rental company that designs a complete new service offering and then trains the entire team, invests in a lot of equipment, and does all this other stuff, rather than maybe having a test case where they go out and they say, hey, why don't you pilot this? Let's see if it works. We haven't invested a lot of time and money in it. I want you to give me feedback. I'm going to call a customer. I'm going to ask them for feedback. And we're going to fix all the problems that we could possibly have in this when the batch is small. So that way, once it gets bigger, we have fewer of those issues. Because if the issue is large in a small batch, it's going to be ginormous in a large batch. So we want to have test cases that we work through on a small basis rather than large batches where we've invested so much time and money into this. And now we're kind of over our skis a little bit. And then it puts the business in an awkward position where maybe it's overinvested and then it's tempted to double down, which we talked about is an issue. We want to be able to pivot. Now, if we're going to pivot, better to pivot when we have the small batch, when we have the small test case study, when we have the pilot program, than if we put everything behind one solution. It's a large batch, a huge investment, and then it fails. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Book It podcast. I had a ton of fun putting all this together. I love talking about lean. In fact, a good portion of what I do as a business coach focuses on solutions for your business through the framework of lean. I'm a firm believer that business should be simpler, not more complex. So if this sounds like you and there's anything I can do to help you grow your business and do it in a lean way, look in the comments for some information on how to get a hold of me. Otherwise, like, click, comment, subscribe, any of those things that you're supposed to be doing. I'd love for you to do that to support the channel. And until next time, this has been Brendan Moran with the Book It Podcast.